In the life that came before this one, my sister and I were both dispatched to the ducal manor. She was to be the wife, and I was to be the mistress. While she found herself buried under mountains of paperwork, driven to distraction by the endless responsibilities, I was the one strolling with the Duke beneath the moonlit flowers. While she was sharply scolded by the Duke, who found her attempts to maintain a dignified grace to be terribly boring, I was the one performing a dance at his banquet, earning a wave of thunderous applause. When she eventually learned that the Duke was making plans to name my son, the son of a mere mistress, as his official heir, my sister finally lost control. She grabbed hold of me during a boat ride, and together we plunged into the cold lake, drowning in a shared watery demise. I awoke with a gasp, reborn on the day before we were both scheduled to be married. This time, however, it was my sister who had experienced a profound change of heart. She was the one who now wanted to be the mistress. A slow smile spread across my face. In that case, I was more than happy to be the Duchess. The day before the wedding was to take place, my sister, Beatrice, had a complete and utter breakdown. I'm not sure what force took possession of her, but she began screaming that she refused to be the Duchess. She insisted, with a terrifying intensity, that she would be a mistress instead. Her mother was so thoroughly furious that she nearly fainted on the spot. "Have you completely lost your mind?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You would throw away a perfectly good and noble title to become some lowly concubine?" Beatrice, her face still bright red with the fresh imprint of her mother's slap, knelt on the floor, but her chin was held high with defiance. "If you don't allow me to be a mistress," she declared, "I would rather die right here, right now." This, father stammered, his face turning an ashen gray. He raised a hand as if to strike her again, but it trembled in the air and then fell limply to his side. Beatrice had always been his favorite child. He had never so much as laid a single finger on her before this day. "Then what do you propose we do?" he asked, his voice weak. "We made a formal agreement with the Duke's family. You were to be his wife, and your sister his mistress. When they arrive tomorrow to collect you, what am I supposed to say?" "My sister can be the Duchess," Beatrice said, her eyes flicking up to meet mine. I froze in place. Her gaze was filled with a venomous, triumphant spite that I recognized all too well. "I'm giving her the position of the primary wife. Surely my dear sister wouldn't refuse such a generous offer, would she?" And just like that, in a flash of chilling understanding, I knew. Beatrice had been reborn too. I knew with perfect clarity exactly why Beatrice was so desperate to be a mistress. In our previous life, she had been completely infatuated with the Duke, Prince Alistair, and had begged our father to arrange the marriage between them. I was actually happy about it when I first heard the news. Because my mother was my father's favored concubine, his legal wife and her daughter Beatrice had always made our lives miserable. My mother and I walked on eggshells every single day, terrified of causing the slightest offense. With Beatrice gone from the house, I thought I might finally be able to ask father to permit me to marry the man I truly loved. My cousin Leo and I were in love. He had already confessed his deep feelings for me and had promised to propose as soon as he earned a proper place at court. His family wasn't particularly wealthy, but he was kind and good to me. My greatest and most sincere wish was to become his wife, to build a quiet life of mutual respect and grow old together. But before she departed for the ducal manor, Beatrice begged father to send me along with her, claiming she wanted a sister by her side for comfort and support. In reality, she just wanted a familiar target to continue tormenting. The Duke already had 2 other mistresses in his household. Pestered relentlessly by Beatrice, my father could only agree, telling me I would simply have to suffer the indignity of being a concubine. I cried and I pleaded with him, but Beatrice's mother just said coldly, "Marriage is decided by your parents and the matchmaker. Besides, for a girl of your station, marrying into the Duke's household is a blessing. What more could you possibly want?" I cried until I fainted that day. No one cared. In the end, I had no choice but to burn all of Leo's letters and climb into the sedan chair that was bound for the ducal manor. Beatrice married into the family expecting a life of romantic bliss with the Duke. She threw herself into managing the vast household, meticulously maintaining the perfect poise of a duchess, trying to give no one any reason to find fault with her. But Prince Alastair was a man who lived for pleasure. He had no interest whatsoever in her dignified and proper airs, and much preferred my livelier, more engaging personality. While Beatrice was drowning in financial ledgers, the Duke was in my chambers, reciting poetry with me under the soft moonlight. At a grand banquet, the Duke openly criticized Beatrice's rigid etiquette, calling her a block of wood right to her face. Unfeeling, he'd called her. Meanwhile, I performed a captivating dance that won a standing ovation from all the guests. They praised me, saying I danced like a celestial fairy and that the Duke was an incredibly lucky man to have me. Other than his obligatory nights on the 1st and 15th of the month, the Duke never once visited Beatrice's chambers. Day after day, she sat alone in her vast, empty rooms, smashing everything within reach in fits of rage. As for me, a mere mistress didn't need to be so prim and proper. I became whatever the Duke wanted me to be, and he spent his nights with me. He doted on me so much, in fact, that he would often take me to important social events instead of his own wife. Beatrice's jealousy grew deeper and more corrosive with each passing day. It finally boiled over when she heard that I was pregnant and that the Duke had promised to make my son his heir if it was a boy. She went completely mad. During a boat ride on the estate's lake, she grabbed me and pulled me into the frigid water. Our heavy winter clothes soaked through instantly, and she held me down, preventing anyone from being able to save us. Soon, we both sank to the bottom. So, of course, Beatrice wanted to be the mistress this time around. She must have thought that being the Duchess was far too restrictive, that being a mistress was freer, and, more importantly, more loved by the Duke. Besides, if her son became the next Duke, a temporary title like mistress meant nothing in the long run. She was such a fool. I gently stroked the ornate bridal gown and crown that should have been hers. No woman would willingly debase herself to please a man, unless she had no other choice in the matter. If she truly thought being a mistress was so wonderful, well, I would be happy to let her have a taste of it. The next day, Beatrice and I were married on the same day. I entered the manor through the main gate. She was brought in through the side entrance. But as Duke Alastair helped me from the carriage, Beatrice, standing just behind me, lifted a corner of her veil and shot him a shy, flirtatious smile. Alastair simply raised an eyebrow, a flicker of interest appearing in his eyes. Later that night, when he lifted my own veil, he seemed slightly displeased to find me with my eyes lowered in a submissive, humble posture. In our last life, I was already making eyes at him by this point, sending silent invitations with my gaze. Alastair loved that sort of thing. It's why, after spending the obligatory wedding night with Beatrice, he spent the next several nights in my room. But now, I was the Duchess. Surrounded by maids and chaperones at all times, I couldn't afford such a forward display. Sure enough, the very next morning, Alastair couldn't wait to go to Beatrice's chambers. He only rushed back just as I was about to serve tea to his parents. His clothes were still slightly disheveled, and there was a noticeable smudge of lipstick on his neck. I saw it, but I said nothing, respectfully kneeling to serve tea to his mother, the Princess Dowager, and her husband. The Princess Dowager was a woman of peculiar and strict temperament. Beatrice had suffered a great deal at her hands in our past life. Now she just stared at me as I held the scalding teacup, saying nothing. The intense heat burned my palms, but I didn't make a sound, my trembling hands the only sign of my discomfort. My expression remained perfectly deferential. After a long, tense moment, she finally took the cup. "You may rise," she said softly. I flexed my aching fingers and rose, my eyes still downcast. The Princess Dowager looked me up and down. She may be the daughter of a concubine, but at least she knows her manners. She slid a beautiful red coral bracelet from her own wrist and handed it to me. "This was a wedding gift from my brother, the Emperor. It's yours now. From this day forward, you will uphold the rules of this house. Do not bring shame upon the ducal name." I nodded in assent. That very day, the Princess Dowager gave me the official seal for the household accounts and all the ledgers, telling me to learn my duties well. Managing the ducal estate was an immensely complex task. I had only managed to look through 2 of the account books when Alastair arrived. "How are you settling in? What's this?" He picked up a ledger, flipped through it casually, and his brow furrowed in annoyance. What is all this? I spoke softly. My lord, these are the household ledgers. I was just reviewing them. It seems this year several of our estates. Enough, enough. He cut me off impatiently. Don't bother me with such trivial matters. You're ruining the mood. Yes, my lord. Just as I was about to help him undress, Beatrice's personal maid suddenly appeared at the door. Your Grace, my lady says she has learned a new song on the lute and wishes for you to hear it. Alistair's interest was immediately piqued. Oh, he put his coat back on without a second thought. Let's go. I must hear this. He didn't spare me another glance as he left. My hands, frozen in midair, slowly fell to my sides. Your Grace, my personal maid whispered, biting her lip in frustration. It's only the second day of the marriage, and she's already using these cheap tricks. Perhaps we should report this to the Princess Dowager and have her— There's no need, I said, sitting back down at the table and picking up the ledger. It was better this way. Compared to serving a fickle man, I much preferred balancing the books. In the days that followed, I adhered strictly to protocol, never missing my morning and evening duties to the elders. The Princess Dowager was a devout woman and often had me spend entire days copying sutras by hand. In our last life, this particular task had made Beatrice despise the Princess Dowager. Alistair hated anything to do with religion. The moment he saw his wife copying scriptures, he would turn and leave, sometimes staying away for half a month at a time. Beatrice had often complained about the Princess Dowager in private, and her copying was always rushed or pawned off on a servant. I, however, completed each manuscript with meticulous care, never making a single error. Over time, the Princess Dowager's attitude toward me softened considerably. When I presented the meticulously organized household accounts to her, she would even offer a rare word of praise. Well done! While I was copying sutras, Alistair was almost always in Beatrice's chambers. Beatrice's methods of seduction were even more brazen than mine had been in our past life. Knowing Alistair's taste for romantic dalliances and bawdy verses, she had gone so far as to learn the arts of pleasing a man from professional courtesans. Soon, Alistair was completely bewitched, spending every single night with her. She even managed to lure him away on the nights he was officially supposed to be with me. The staff in my courtyard felt indignant on my behalf, but I never made an issue of it. It wasn't until an invitation to the Prime Minister's spring banquet arrived that things finally came to a head. After reading it, Alistair announced that he was taking Beatrice. When Beatrice heard the news, she came to my chamber specifically to gloat. She covered her mouth with her hand, a smug smile playing on her lips. So, dear sister, how does it feel to be the Duchess? I am the one the Duke truly cherishes. What do you have besides an empty title? I remained perfectly calm. Is that so? Seeing that I wasn't angry, Beatrice sneered. Keep up the act! She turned and swept out of the room. After she left, my maid fumed. Your Grace, did you see her? The nerve of that woman. She's only enjoying a moment of favor. Why don't we ask the Duke to take you instead? You are the Duchess, after all. I smiled faintly. I don't need to ask him. Just watch. Someone will be here to fetch me soon enough. And just as I had predicted, it wasn't long before a servant from the Princess Dowager arrived to summon me. When I reached the main hall, Alistair was already being scolded. You'd take a lowly mistress to an official function instead of your own wife, the Princess Dowager said sharply. You may not care about your reputation, but the ducal house still has its dignity. Alistair stuck out his chin stubbornly. But I love Beatrice. Clara is a block of wood. I'd be embarrassed to be seen with her. Besides, Beatrice is the daughter of a Secretary of State, while Clara is just the daughter of a concubine. What right does she have to accompany me in public? The Princess Dowager was livid, but seeing her son was immune to reason, she sighed and pressed her forehead. She had to compromise. Fine, you may take Beatrice, but the Duchess must go with you as well. In the end, Alistair reluctantly brought me along. The Prime Minister's eldest son, a high-ranking official himself, came to greet us with his wife. Upon seeing Beatrice, he immediately said, "This must be the Duchess. The Duke is a fortunate man." It was an easy mistake to make. Alistair spoiled Beatrice, and the family's treasures flowed endlessly into her chambers. She was dressed in a silk brocade, gifted to the Duke by the Emperor himself, a fabric worth a fortune. Even her shoes were adorned with large, perfect pearls. She looked far more opulent than I, the actual Duchess. A nearby maid whispered, "This is Lady Beatrice, that is our Duchess." The official froze, then bowed to me awkwardly. "My apologies, Your Grace. It seems my eyes have failed me. Please don't hold it against me." The smile never left my face. "You flatter me, my lord." Beside me, Beatrice's lips curved into a slight, disdainful smirk as she shot me a look of contempt. At the banquet, the men went to the front hall while the women gathered in the rear garden. Dressed to the nines, Beatrice flitted about like a butterfly, trying to ingratiate herself with the other noble ladies. She was truly playing the part of the lady of the manor, but those who knew the truth watched her with open amusement, whispering among themselves. "She's just a mistress, yet she acts like she's the wife." I know, right? She's wearing every valuable thing she owns. It's so tacky. Honestly, how shameless. That Duke has no sense of propriety, bringing a mistress to an event like this. Only a few ladies, unaware of Beatrice's true status, treated her as the Duchess, showing her great courtesy and warmth. Beatrice, likely drunk on her own self-importance, had forgotten that in this life, she was no longer the Duchess. She walked straight up to the Prime Minister's wife. The Prime Minister was a pillar of the court, the patriarch of a powerful family with countless high-ranking officials in its ranks. Alistair, despite his title, held no real power and had only his mother's imperial influence to lean on. He had long been trying to curry favor with the Prime Minister's family. Beatrice approached the Prime Minister's wife and said, "My lady, I am the daughter of the Secretary of War. The Duke brought me here today." She thought she had cleverly sidestepped her own status. "The Duke is hosting a small gathering at his country estate later this month and would be honored if you and the Prime Minister would attend." The Prime Minister's wife said nothing, merely looking Beatrice up and down with a critical eye. "Are you the Duchess?" she asked coolly. Beatrice's face stiffened. "I am a concubine in the Duke's household." The Prime Minister's wife then smiled, a smile laced with undisguised contempt and mockery. "A concubine is inviting me to a party? Are these the manners of the ducal house?" Without another word, she turned and walked away. Beatrice, having never suffered such a public humiliation, turned red and instinctively grabbed the woman's sleeve. The lady violently shook her off. "Get away from me," she snapped. "How dare a creature as low as dirt behave so audaciously in my home?" Beatrice was stunned into silence, frozen on the spot. From the side, I couldn't help but smile. She was so stupid. The Prime Minister's wife was famous for her rigid adherence to status, propriety, and honor. She had an iron will. In my last life, when Alistair brought me to this very banquet, she hadn't even given me a passing glance, as if looking at me might soil her eyes. Not a single lady in the garden spoke to me. They chatted warmly amongst themselves while I sat alone, feeling utterly out of place. It was then that I truly understood how much status mattered. Beatrice thought I had been so glamorous in my past life, always on the Duke's arm. She had no idea about the cold shoulders and condescending looks I endured. Since she wanted to be a mistress so badly, it was her turn to taste the bitterness that came with it. I smoothed my sleeves and walked over, my posture poised and confident. "My apologies, my lady. My household's mistress is unaccustomed to these affairs. I hope you'll forgive her." With that, I produced an invitation from my sleeve. "I am the Duchess. The Duke is hosting a small gathering later this month. Please, I insist you and the Prime Minister attend, so that the Duke and I may apologize in person." The Prime Minister's wife looked at me, then took the invitation. "The servant's impudence has nothing to do with you, Your Grace. My husband and I will be sure to attend." Beatrice, still standing there, trembled with rage at being called a servant. But what else was she? In polite society, a mistress was little more than property. Men frequently gifted mistresses to one another. It was a common practice. Only a fool like Alistair would spoil a mistress to the point of neglecting his wife. He might fall for it, but the rest of the world wouldn't. After the Prime Minister's wife left, I leaned in close to Beatrice. Sister, what is the Duke's heart really worth? As long as I have the title, the master is the master, and the servant is the servant. Wouldn't you agree? That banquet was a complete disaster. Beatrice brought great shame upon the ducal house. Everyone was saying the family lacked discipline. If Alistair had held any real position of power, the court censors would have impeached him for his poor management of his own household. The Princess Dowager was furious and ordered Beatrice to be confined to her quarters for 3 months. Alistair was angry with her too, but after she cried in his arms a few times and performed a few more seductive dances, his anger subsided and he went right back to doting on her. He even managed to procure something called moon petal pearls. A single one was worth 100 ounces of gold. When consumed, it was said to make a woman's skin exceptionally fair and smooth, and to give her body a natural, intoxicating fragrance. After Beatrice started taking them, Alistair was utterly mesmerized, spending a solid month holed up with her in her chambers. He even skipped my birthday, a day he had promised to spend with me. I sat quietly watching the moon rise over the empty courtyard. The food on the table had long gone cold, the grease congealing into a sickening film. Faint sounds of laughter and the gentle plucking of a lute drifted from outside, carried on the night air. I sent my maid to see what was happening. She returned shortly, her lips pressed into a thin, angry line. "It's the Duke. He's on the lake with Lady Beatrice. I told him it was your birthday, but she said, I looked up. Said what? The maid's voice was filled with indignation. She told him that if he came to see you tonight, he should never bother coming back to her room again. And then the Duke just pulled her close and kissed her, and said he'd never come here again." She bit her lip, muttering, "That woman, she's nothing but a seductress." "Oh," I said, my gaze falling. "Then clear the table and bring me the ledgers." "Your Grace." My maid seemed worried I was heartbroken, but, seeing no trace of sadness on my face, she could only do as she was told. Thanks to Alistair's favor, Beatrice's status in the manor seemed to eclipse my own. The servants began treating her as if she were the Duchess. If I didn't hold the keys to the household treasury, even the storekeepers would have likely started fawning over her. Beatrice was incredibly smug, coming by every few days to gloat, as if trying to reclaim the dignity she had lost at the Prime Minister's party. The day of the ducal banquet arrived, and the country estate was bustling with guests. Although Alistair held no real power, his mother was the Emperor's full-blooded sister. The two had been close since childhood, so everyone came if only to show respect to the Princess Dowager. The hall was filled with the clinking of glasses. The Princess Dowager sat at the head table. By all rights, Alistair should have been seated with me. Instead, he sat with Beatrice. Beatrice, perhaps hoping to reclaim her lost face, was dressed even more extravagantly than before. She wore a crimson gown woven with silver thread, a style officially reserved for a primary wife. Her hair was adorned with gold pins and pearl-tasseled hairpieces. She was already a striking woman, and this ostentatious display drew the eyes of everyone in the room. In comparison, my own modest attire made me seem plain and unremarkable. Alistair's friends were a crowd of well-known rakes from the capital. After a few drinks, one of them shouted, "Your Grace, we've heard that the Duchess was once famous throughout the capital for her whirling dance. Why not have her perform for us so we can see for ourselves?" The Princess Dowager's face turned to stone. The rest of the hall fell silent. I had indeed performed a whirling dance once, at my father's birthday celebration. At the time, I was just the daughter of a concubine, and dancing was considered a display of filial piety, so no one said anything. In fact, many praised me. But now, at a ducal banquet, being asked to perform like a common entertainer was a profound humiliation for a duchess, but these men were reckless fools. Arguing with them would only make the ducal house look petty. Alistair, already drunk, waved a hand at me. "My dear, just dance one song. I've never seen you dance before." Suddenly, a man from the back of the hall stood up. "How can the Duchess be expected to dance like an entertainer?" he said sternly. "I implore you, Your Grace, retract your command." I was startled and looked toward the man sitting in the lowest seat. The light was dim, and I hadn't been able to make out who was there, though I had felt a steady gaze on me all evening. When I saw his face, my mind went blank. Leo. We had promised that he would come for me once he had secured his position. I'd heard he had graduated with top honors and that the Emperor, who was quite fond of him, had given him a post at the Royal Academy. He had a limitless future ahead of him. I never expected him to be here, or that he would speak up for me. My fists clenched and my heart tightened. In our last life, after he heard I'd been married off, Leo fell gravely ill. We never saw each other again. Of course, back then, my favor with the Duke was the talk of the capital. He probably thought I was happy and saw no reason to seek me out. I never imagined he would still stand up for me. Had he been at this banquet in our last life, too? What did he feel when he saw me dance then? My heart was a mess of emotions. My voice came out stiff. "My lord, I'm not feeling well today. I'm afraid I cannot perform." Alistair scowled in disgust. "I knew it. You're always a block of wood. Of course you can't dance." He insulted me like this in front of everyone, with not a shred of respect. The Princess Dowager gripped her goblet. "Alistair, you're drunk." Just as we were about to move past the incident, Beatrice stood up. The jewels in her hair glittered, the light catching in her eyes and making them shine like spring water. "My love," she cooed, "I've recently learned a whirling dance myself. Perhaps you'll allow me to show you what I can do." My love was the pet name Alistair had her use, an intimate term meant for the bedroom. Beatrice meant to show off their special bond, but she didn't realize how the other guests were now looking at her. The men's gazes were lecherous and hungry. The women's were full of disgust and contempt. From a lower table, a lady whispered, "Truly a commoner at heart." "I heard she's the legitimate daughter of the Secretary of War. Why is she so shameless?" "Is that how they raise their children?" "Exactly. A proper lady choosing to be a mistress. She was born for the gutter." My father, who was also a guest, looked mortified. He stared at Beatrice as if he wanted to drag her out and drown her on the spot. The ladies who were friendly with my stepmother now gave her the cold shoulder. My stepmother's face was beet red. She looked like she wanted the earth to swallow her whole. If she were just a common mistress, her dancing would have been fine. A mistress's status wasn't much better than an entertainer's after all. But Beatrice was the legitimate daughter of the Secretary of War. She represented his family's honor. In my last life, I hadn't wanted to dance either, but I had no choice when Alistair commanded it. I didn't have a powerful family to back me up like Beatrice did. As the daughter of a concubine, my life was only decent when my father remembered I existed. Otherwise, I was no better than a headmaid. Alistair was my only support. I had to please him. But Beatrice was doing this voluntarily. With this act, she showed no regard for her parents or for me. She was grinding her family's honor into the dirt. Beatrice, however, was oblivious. She shed her outer robe, revealing a sheer, gauzy dress, and began to dance to the music. I had to admit she had put a lot of effort into her dancing. She was as light as a fairy floating under the moon, her every spin and glance a flirtatious invitation. Alistair's eyes were glued to her, and he clapped his hands in delight. His friends cheered wildly, and even after the dance ended, they were still marveling at her, telling Alistair how lucky he was. Alistair was beaming. "Simply divine. Compared to you, your sister is a corpse. If you give me a son, I swear I will make him my heir." A murmur went through the crowd. Only my stepmother's brow relaxed, a faint smile gracing her lips. In our last life, those words had been spoken to me. Now, hearing them, Beatrice's eyes shone with a triumphant light. As she passed my table, she leaned in and whispered, "Sister, do you still think a title is so important? What good is being the Duchess? In the end, my son will be the one to inherit everything." Alistair was about to say more, but was cut off. A drunken rake stood up, slurring, "Your Grace, I'd offer 1,000 gold pieces for this mistress of yours. Would you be willing to part with her?" The speaker was the only son of Prince Caspian, the Emperor's most favored son. The official crown prince was the eldest, but he was not well liked by his father. Rumor had it the Emperor had considered deposing him and installing Prince Caspian several times, only to be blocked by his ministers. If Prince Caspian were to one day take the throne, his son would be the new crown prince, the future emperor. Alistair's face changed. He forced a smile. She's hardly worthy of the heir of Caspian. Why don't I find you a few better ones? I guarantee they'll be stunning beauties. The heir chuckled. But I like this one. It seems you're not willing to do me this small favor. In truth, while Beatrice's dance was beautiful, it wasn't so extraordinary as to warrant the attention of the notoriously picky heir of Caspian. There were courtesans more beautiful and more seductive than her, but she was a lady of good breeding. Men like him enjoyed the sport of turning a lady into a whore, and a whore into a lady. So when she danced, she had an allure that a professional courtesan lacked, which made her exceptionally tempting. Beatrice panicked. If she hadn't been so in love with Alistair, her status as the daughter of the Secretary of War could have easily made her a concubine to the crown prince. Why had she stooped to being a mere duke's mistress? Her eyes reddened instantly, and she threw herself into Alistair's arms. My love, I won't go. I won't leave you. Alistair's face was grim. He held her, but said nothing. Sensing his hesitation, Beatrice began to wail. I was born your woman, and I will die your woman. If you truly mean to send me away, you might as well give me a silken cord. I'd rather hang myself and be done with it. Alistair forced another smile and patted her hand. What are you saying? How could I bear to let you die? Go and serve the heir well. A life of riches and glory is still ahead of you. Beatrice's legs gave out and she collapsed to the floor. She stared in disbelief at the man she had loved for days on end, the man who had whispered words of love to her. One moment he was promising to make her son his heir. The next, simply because he didn't dare offend the heir of Caspian, he was giving her away without a second thought. Beatrice had never truly seen herself as a mistress. In her eyes, her title was just a formality. In reality, she held a higher status than I, the Duchess. Even the Prime Minister's wife's rebuke had only angered her for a few days. This was probably the first time she had been forced to understand that she was just a concubine. And in the eyes of these men, a concubine was just an object, no different from a table or a chair. She might be a favored object, but an object nonetheless. An object that could be discarded at will. She could not let them send her away. She fell to the floor and began to kowtow desperately, tears streaming down her face. She banged her head on the ground until her forehead was swollen and bleeding. The pins fell from her hair, and her gauzy dress was covered in dust. She was a pathetic sight, all traces of her earlier triumph gone. If Alistair really sent her away, it would confirm her status as a servant for all to see. The heir of Caspian was not Alistair. The Duke still had to show my father some respect, but Prince Caspian answered to no one. The heir was known for his debauchery and cruelty. Rumor had it countless women had died in his private quarters. If she were sent to him, her fate was sealed. Beatrice was crying too hard to speak. My lord! My lord! The banquet descended into chaos, filled with Beatrice's frantic screams. Alistair waved his hand dismissively. Take Lady Beatrice away to rest. A few stout maids came forward, covered Beatrice's mouth, and forcibly dragged her away. Alistair glanced at the heir of Caspian's face and added, Clean her up. Send her to the heir's estate tonight. A smile finally touched the heir's lips as he sat back down, satisfied. My stepmother's face went white. She gasped for air and fainted. In the end, Beatrice wasn't sent away. It wasn't because Alistair had a change of heart. It was because my stepmother went home and begged my father on her knees. Though he was furious at Beatrice for shaming the family, she was still the daughter he had cherished for so many years. For the sake of his family's reputation and his own heart, he couldn't let Beatrice be ruined by the heir of Caspian. So he swallowed his pride and went to the Prime Minister, who then personally appealed to Prince Caspian to let the matter drop. After this incident, Beatrice finally learned her lesson. She returned to our family home in tears, saying she didn't want to be a mistress anymore. Though my father still loved her, much of his affection had been worn away by the ordeal. We tried to stop you, he said impatiently, but you threatened to kill yourself if you couldn't be a mistress. You're already married. What can I possibly do now? She whipped her head around to look at me, her teeth clenched. Make her the mistress. She's the daughter of a concubine. That's what she should have been all along. The title of Duchess was always meant to be mine. I was stunned. I couldn't believe Beatrice could be so stupid as to say something like that. Absurd! As expected, my father slammed his hand on the table, his face filled with rage. This is the ducal house, not some common family we can manipulate as we please. You were the one who insisted on being a mistress. Now you can regret it all you want, but there's nothing to be done. Father! Father! Beatrice cried, crawling towards him on her knees. Am I not your most beloved child? You used to say that if anyone bullied me after I married, you would move heaven and earth to stand up for me. You don't know how cruel Alistair can be. What if he tries to give me away again? If that happens, I truly won't be able to go on living. Her voice rose to a hysterical shriek as she collapsed at his feet. My stepmother, her eyes red and swollen, hugged her, and they both wept. A look of pain crossed my father's face, and tears welled in his eyes. How touching. I watched the three of them cling to each other, my heart filled with a mix of scorn and a sliver of sadness. Beatrice was so foolish because my father and stepmother had allowed her to be. She was their first child, the recipient of all their love. From the day she was born, they shielded her from anything that might cause her a moment's displeasure. Father called her the apple of his eye. Beatrice never even had to ask for what she wanted. It was simply handed to her. Beatrice could afford to be a fool. She was born lucky. As for me, while my mother was my father's favorite concubine, by the time I was born, he already had many children. His affection for me was thin. My stepmother disliked my mother, and by extension, she disliked me. She often took out her frustrations on me for no reason. I still remember when I was 6, Beatrice offered to play with me. It was the first time she had ever spoken to me voluntarily. I was so flattered, I stupidly followed her. She took me to my father's study and showed me a vase, telling me the flowers on it were painted by a master. It was my father's favorite. As I was admiring it, she smiled sweetly and let it slip from her hands. Smash! The vase shattered on the floor. That day, my father was livid. He demanded to know who broke it. Before I could speak, Beatrice burst into tears and pointed at me. Clara insisted I play with her. I told her the vase was father's favorite and not to touch it, but she just had to play with it. Sob. I panicked and insisted I hadn't, but a nearby maid stepped forward and pointed at me. It was the young miss. I saw her with my own eyes. My father's face turned black with rage, and he slapped me across the face. Everything went dark. When I came to, I was lying on the floor. My stepmother walked over and looked down at me, frowning. My lord, she's just a child. Let's not be too hard on her. But we can't let her become spoiled. She needs to learn some discipline. Let her kneel in the ancestral hall for a night to reflect on her actions. My father agreed. I was only 6 years old. I knelt in the pitch-black hall on an empty stomach. Because my stepmother wanted me to reflect, the maids had taken away the kneeling cushion. I knelt on the hard, cold floor. If I tried to sit, a matron would come in and whip my back with a thin bamboo rod. By morning, I had lost all feeling in my legs. When the servants came to let me out, I tried to stand and immediately collapsed. After that, I fell terribly ill. I had a high fever for 3 days and nearly didn't wake up. When I finally did, the first face I saw was Beatrice's. She looked at me like I was something disgusting she'd found on her shoe. Your mother is a whore, and so are you. Whores deserve to die. You got lucky this time. If your mother ever tries her seductive tricks on father again, you won't get off so easily. After she left, my mother held me, her tears soaking my clothes. This weak woman hadn't dared to plead for me when my father was angry. All she could do was cry. It was then that I understood. In this house, if I wanted to survive, I had to rely on myself. Beatrice didn't let up. She continued to find fault with me at every turn. But I was learning. I started to try and please my father, putting on a sweet, innocent act, wrapping my arms around his neck and calling him Daddy. Slowly, he started to pay a little more attention to me. It was only because of that sliver of affection that I managed to grow up in one piece. And that's why, in my last life, I had worked so hard to please Alistair. Because I knew that compared to Beatrice, I was born with nothing. If she fell out of favor, she was still the noble duchess with a powerful family behind her. But if I fell out of favor, I had nothing. Beatrice could crush me as easily as she could crush an ant. I never wanted to fight with her. But why did she have to destroy my chance at happiness, too? I could have been a proper wife, growing old with a man I loved. Since she couldn't stand to see me happy, then I had no choice but to fight. I pulled my gaze back to the present and was about to speak when my father cut in. He looked as if he had aged 10 years in an instant. "Clara, you've always been the sensible one. You've never caused me any trouble." I froze, understanding his unspoken words. I looked at him in disbelief. Was my father actually planning to make Beatrice the Duchess again? "Father!" I shot to my feet, nearly laughing from the sheer absurdity of it. "The ducal house is not some place we can just change our minds about again and again." My father lowered his head. "Beatrice is right. She's the legitimate daughter. The title of Duchess should have been hers. You've had it for a while now, so just—" My stepmother jumped in. "Just give the position back to your sister. Beatrice has been pampered her whole life. How can she endure such hardship?" I looked at my mother. She was cowering in the back, silent. My stepmother shot her a sharp look and gave her a shove. My mother spoke in a low voice. "Clara, just give up the position." I stood there, stunned. The sun was shining warmly outside, but I felt as if I were back in that freezing ancestral hall, 6 years old again. I didn't understand. My stepmother would do anything to protect Beatrice. But my own mother had never once protected me. After a long moment, my voice came out hoarse. "Mother, have you ever thought about what will happen to me?" It was the first time I had ever called her mother, instead of the more formal madam. My mother avoided my gaze, mumbling, "Clara, your stepmother is right. You were born of a concubine." I suddenly found it all so laughable. I stumbled back a step, catching myself on the table. A moment later, I had composed myself, my duchess-like poise restored. "Of course, I am willing to give the position to my elder sister," I said softly, "but father, I'm afraid the ducal house will not agree." "Alistair adores me," Beatrice said shrilly. "If you just talk to him, I'm sure he'll agree." "Let's go!" she shrieked, grabbing my sleeve and pulling me toward the door. "We'll go tell the Princess Dowager right now." To win back the title for Beatrice, my stepmother actually got on her knees before the Princess Dowager. The Princess Dowager took a slow sip of her tea. "Clara," she said coolly, "what are your thoughts on this?" I knelt and bowed. "I will do as my family wishes." Hearing this, my stepmother's spirits lifted. "Since Clara has agreed, Your Highness, why not let them switch? Clara is, after all, the daughter of a concubine. To have such a person as the Duchess, it reflects poorly on the ducal house." "Oh?" the Princess Dowager sneered. "And when you deceived us in the first place, swapping the mistress for the wife, you weren't concerned about the ducal house's reputation then?" My stepmother choked, unable to respond. "My love," Beatrice pleaded, looking at Alistair. Alistair, still feeling a bit guilty about the recent incident, thought for a moment. "Mother, just let them switch. They're sisters. No one will say anything." A glimmer of hope appeared in Beatrice's eyes. I remained kneeling, silent. The Princess Dowager laughed, then slammed her teacup down on the table. "Switching the legitimate and illegitimate daughters back and forth? Do you take me for a fool? I'll take this matter to the Emperor himself and ask him what sort of rules you people think you're playing by." My father panicked. "Your Highness, forgive me. I was just overwrought." The Princess Dowager ignored him, her gaze fixed on Alistair. "No one will say anything? You want to elevate a dancing mistress to the position of Duchess? People won't just be laughing at you, they'll be laughing at me. Look at her," she said, pointing at Beatrice. "Does she have the composure of a wife? I fear if you make her Duchess today, the entire reputation of this house will be in ruins by tomorrow." My stepmother's face paled at the harsh words, but she didn't dare argue. My father's face was crimson with shame. He pulled at her arm. I was a fool today. A complete fool. We'll leave at once. Your Highness, please forgive us. I sneered inwardly. So that was the extent of his love for Beatrice. As long as his own interests weren't at stake, he was happy to sacrifice me. But the moment the Princess Dowager mentioned the Emperor, he immediately backed down. The Princess Dowager waved a dismissive hand. I won't see you out. My father and stepmother scurried away in humiliation. I remained kneeling, expecting the Princess Dowager to turn her anger on me. Instead, she walked over to me, sighed softly, and gently patted my head. Don't be afraid. From now on, I will protect you. They had treated me so horribly before, yet I hadn't shed a single tear. But at those words, my eyes suddenly burned with heat. In 2 lifetimes, no one had ever said that to me. Don't be afraid. Beatrice failed to reclaim her title. Her only option was to double down on pleasing Alistair. She must have realized that from now on, his affection was all she had to rely on. Alistair remained quite fond of her. Even when new women entered the household, he never completely forgot her. Perhaps remembering his promise to make her son his heir, Beatrice clung to Alistair more tightly than ever. He hadn't set foot in my courtyard for 2 whole months. It was the height of summer. I was sipping tea while the steward reported the month's expenses. Why are the expenditures so high this month? 700 silver pieces more than last month. The steward gave an embarrassed smile. His Grace purchased a case of moon-petal pearls for Lady Beatrice. They are quite expensive, so we had to withdraw a little extra. One of my young maids, being blunt, muttered, All she knows are these cheap tricks. How shameless. How many of these moon-petal pearls has Lady Beatrice taken in total? The steward looked uneasy. She goes through a case every month. By now, she must have had 70 or 80 of them. I did a quick calculation in my head, then lowered my eyes. Give His Grace another 1,000 silver pieces. Tell him to buy more. My maid was aghast. Your Grace, how can you let him buy more? If you do, he'll never come to our courtyard. I smiled. Money is no object, as long as the Duke is happy. One after another, the moon-petal pearls worked their magic. Beatrice grew more radiant by the day. Her skin became as white as jade, a subtle fragrance clung to her every move, and she was so light on her feet she could have danced on the palm of a hand. Alistair was more infatuated than ever, and soon she had good news. At the end of July, Alistair brought Beatrice with him when he dined with the Princess Dowager. As she was serving food, Beatrice turned away, covering her mouth with a handkerchief and retching. The Princess Dowager paused and sent for the physician. After checking her pulse, the doctor smiled and bowed. Congratulations, my lady, you are with child. You're a little over a month along. Alistair, who was still without a son, was overjoyed. He pulled her into his arms. You've done well. If you give me a son this time, I will petition to have him named as my heir. Beatrice was ecstatic. He said this without any consideration for me, his duchess, sitting right there. The Princess Dowager, however, frowned. Since you are with child, she said coolly, you need not attend me for daily greetings anymore. From the moment she knew she was pregnant, Beatrice shed all her previous caution. As her belly grew, she developed a craving for sour foods and claimed that the shape of her belly meant she was carrying a son. She went to Alistair and asked that I be made to serve her. My love, I've been feeling so unwell lately. Clara is my sister, and she always took such good care of me at home. I think I'd be more comfortable with her. She stroked her small belly and smiled at me. I'm only thinking of the heir. I'm sure my dear sister understands, right? Before I could answer, my maid couldn't take it anymore. How can the Duchess be expected to serve a mistress? The Princess Dowager herself would never allow such a thing. Even Alistair looked disapproving. Beatrice leaned against him and bit her lip. My love, I'm doing this for our child. You're nearly 30 and still have no heir. I just want to ensure our son is born safely. Alistair's brow smoothed. He gestured at me. Since Beatrice has requested it, you will go and take care of her for a while. You were the illegitimate one back home anyway, and she was the legitimate daughter. It's only right that you serve her. I looked at him for a long moment, then said softly, Yes, my lord. I will take good care of my sister. It was a sweltering summer, but Beatrice's room was cool with blocks of ice placed all around. She had used up almost all the ice for the year. When my maid went to the stores to get some, the steward could only say apologetically, "His Grace has ordered that Lady Beatrice is with child and sensitive to the heat. All the ice in the manor is to go to her first." Beatrice settled into bed and said softly, "I'm a little thirsty. Bring me some tea." When I brought her the tea, she took a sip and spat it out, scolding, "Why is this so cold? I wanted hot water. You worthless thing, do you really think you're a duchess? Can't you do one simple thing, right?" I had brought her warm water. Helpless, I went back and added more hot water. She still complained it was too cold. Finally, I poured freshly boiled water directly into the cup. Beatrice's eyes darted around, and with a small smile, she let the cup slip from her hand. The scalding water splashed onto my arm, instantly turning a large patch of skin red. Beatrice smiled with satisfaction. "Clara, an illegitimate daughter is an illegitimate daughter. Did you really think becoming Duchess would put you above me?" "What good is being the Duchess?" she whispered, leaning closer. "The one who holds the Duke's heart is the true wife. You can only blame yourself for being so stupid. In this house, do you really think an empty title means anything? You will always be worthless." Then she pointed to her own legs. "I've been walking so much, my legs are sore. Sister, why don't you give me a massage? Kneel and do it." My hands froze. Then I smiled. "What are you smiling at?" Beatrice asked suspiciously. I didn't answer, instead gently stroking her hand. "Sister, your skin is so smooth and white, and you smell so fragrant." Beatrice preened. "These are the moon petal pearls the Duke bought for me for a fortune. Of course you wouldn't have any." My lips curved. "But sister, did you know that the moon petal pearls have another name? Wombane?" Beatrice froze. I continued. "Moon petal pearls. Wombane. They make a woman's skin fair and fragrant, and a single pearl costs 100 gold pieces. The Duke truly spoils you." "But sister," I said, glancing at her stomach, "did you know they're loaded with abortifacients? Did you really think you'd be able to carry this child to term?" Beatrice stared blankly for a moment, then flew into a rage, throwing her teacup at me. "Nonsense! What wombane? Why would Alistair give me something like that?" I scoffed. "Sister, did you really think that in our last life, as much as Alistair doted on me, he didn't give me the same thing? The first time he brought them to me, I had someone investigate their ingredients. Even if you hadn't killed me, I would have lost that child anyway." Beatrice's face went white, and a cold sweat broke out on her forehead, but she still tried to deny it. "Impossible! Alistair loves me so much. He said if I gave him a son, he would make him the heir. He promised!" I burst out laughing. "You think he cares about that? All he cares about is whether you can please him, whether your body is to his liking. He has so many women in his harem, why would he care if one mistress can bear children? He's not even 30 yet. It's not like he's an old man desperate for an heir. He would never make a mistress's son his heir. Even if he wanted to, the Princess Dowager and the Emperor would never allow it. He knew you couldn't carry the child to term. That's why he was so bold with his promises." Beatrice's lips trembled. She suddenly seemed to understand. "If you knew all this, why did you take them in our last life?" she hissed. "You must be lying." I laughed again. "Sister, you're still so naive. In my last life, I could have married my cousin and been a proper wife. It was you who insisted on bringing me here as a mistress. As a mistress, what did I have to rely on besides Alistair's favor? If I had refused the pills, he would have tired of me in an instant. What chance would I have had of surviving under your thumb? A child is wonderful, but if you can't even stay alive, what's the point?" I stood up and looked down at her with pity. "You're such a fool. You really thought giving birth to a son would make you the mother of an heir. But you won't be giving birth to this child. And you'll never have another one." With that, I turned and left. Beatrice didn't bother trying to torment me further. That night, she snuck out of the manor. The manor's physician would obviously say whatever Alistair told him to, so Beatrice had never known there was a problem with her body. She returned the next day looking completely broken. That night, screams erupted from her courtyard. I heard she had gone into premature labor. I went as well. When I arrived, Beatrice was lying in a pool of blood, leaning weakly against Alistair. He looked at her with pity. How could you be so careless? Well, if the child is gone, it's gone. We can always have another. Beatrice kept her head down, her expression hidden. She whispered, Yes, you can have other children, but my lord, will I ever have another child? Alistair paused, then smiled. What are you talking about? Of course you— His words stopped. The dagger in Beatrice's hand was buried deep in his chest. She finally looked up, her face a mask of blood and tears, her eyes wild with madness. Alistair, I have loved you for 2 lifetimes. In the last one, you wouldn't even spare me a glance. So this time, I willingly became your mistress. I took the pills you gave me without question, but you destroyed my body just for your own pleasure. She twisted the dagger, a smile on her lips but tears streaming down her face. I saw a doctor. They all said my body is full of poison. This baby was never going to survive, and I can never have children again. Alistair, why would you do this to me? Her voice was a raw, blood-curdling cry. The people around them were frozen in shock. When they finally came to their senses, they rushed to pull her away. But it was too late. Alistair coughed up blood, his eyes fixed on her. You bitch, he rasped. You dare kill this bitch? He couldn't say any more before he collapsed. Beatrice was restrained, blood still streaming from between her legs. She threw her head back and laughed. Alistair, so I was ruined by you in both lifetimes. Her eyes found me and she lunged. Clara, you won't get away with this either. I stood my ground unmoving as a group of servants tackled her and forced her to her knees before me. Take her away, I said, looking down at her. I wasn't surprised that Beatrice killed Alistair. She had finally seen that he was not a man she could rely on. She would one day grow old, and his favor would not last forever. The dream of giving birth to an heir had become the only piece of driftwood she could cling to. Now, Alistair had destroyed her only hope, turning her sacrifice, her willingness to be a mistress, her acceptance of her fate in the last life, into a cruel joke. She was doomed to be a mistress forever. When she grew old, she would have no child to support her. She would truly become nothing more than a servant. She had loved Alistair with all her heart, which is why she hated him with just as much passion. The Princess Dowager fainted from grief when she saw Alistair's body. The first thing she did upon waking was to have Beatrice arrested. Alistair was her only son. For years, no matter how dissolute he became, she could never bring herself to punish him. Now that he had been killed by a mere mistress, she had Beatrice thrown into the dungeons. She gave the order, and nearly every form of torture was used on Beatrice. They even subjected her to the wooden donkey. By the end, there wasn't an inch of unblemished skin on her body. My stepmother visited her once and immediately fainted. When she woke up, she had a stroke and was left paralyzed. When I went to see her, Beatrice was half mad. She lay in her own filth on the floor, rats and insects crawling over her. There was no trace of her former beauty. She had lost her mind, clutching a bundle of straw and murmuring, "Sleep, my child. Mama's here, Mama's here." I walked closer. She looked up at me, and with a sudden lunge, she reached through the bars, trying to scratch me. She still recognized me. Clara! Clara! She rasped. You bitch! Why aren't you dead? Why won't you just die? Even if Alistair didn't love me, he never loved you either. You'll never win. She hated me so much. Her eyes were webbed with blood, and she looked like she wanted to tear my flesh from my bones. But a triumphant, venomous sneer twisted her lips. Ignoring the filth, I grabbed the front of her rags and sneered back. Do you really think I care whether he loved me or not? I never cared about him. Only a fool like you would fall for such a worthless man. Beatrice's voice was like sandpaper. You were born a bastard. You were supposed to serve me your entire life. You're the one who should be dead. I let her go and slowly wiped my hands with a handkerchief, taking a moment to appreciate her miserable state before speaking again. But sister, you're the one who's going to die. And I'm not only going to live, I'm going to live well. I gently touched my abdomen. You don't know, do you? I'm over a month pregnant. Now that Alistair is dead, if my child is a boy, he will be born the heir. This entire estate from now on will be mine. I gently patted her cheek, my smile soft. Thank you, sister, for paving the way for me with your life. You can rest in peace now. Beatrice was such a fool. I was the Duchess. I never had to compete with her for anything. The moment she declared she wanted to be the mistress, she sealed her fate. She was destined to lose everything. Beatrice's eyes became terrifying to look at. Her face contorted, and she shrieked, "No! No!" As I turned to leave, I could still hear her screaming behind me. "Clara, I hope you die a horrible death." I smiled and handed the jailer a bag of silver. She's too loud. The jailer understood. He went down with his whip. Soon the sound of a whip cracking through the air mingled with a woman's screams. I stood there listening with a small smile for a while before I slowly walked away. What a beautiful sound. This was the ending I had waited 2 lifetimes for. The Princess Dowager begged the Emperor to have Beatrice executed by 1,000 cuts. The Emperor had also been fond of his nephew. With a stroke of his brush, he ordered Beatrice to be publicly executed in the market square in 3 days. 3,357 cuts. When the news reached our old home, my stepmother coughed up blood and fell unconscious. 3 days later, I went to watch the execution. The executioner's skill was superb. I counted every cut. It was exactly 3,357. Not one less. As I left, the midday sun was blinding. I closed my eyes and I suddenly remembered sinking into the lake in my last life, my hand desperately reaching for the surface. No matter how hard this life had been, all I ever wanted was to live. And now I finally had my revenge. With Alistair dead, the child in my womb was the ducal house's only heir and its last. Unfortunately, the child didn't survive. I told everyone I had miscarried due to grief over the Duke's death. In reality, I got rid of it myself. I didn't want Alistair's child. A man like him deserved to have his line end. The mere thought of his bloodline growing inside me made me sick. The Princess Dowager's health had declined rapidly since Alistair's death. Her once black hair was now completely white. She still had some affection for me. She summoned me, propping herself up. Alistair is gone. What do you plan to do now? If you wish to stay, this estate will be yours. When I die, you will be the matriarch of this house. What I leave behind will ensure you a life of wealth and comfort for the rest of your days. But if you do not wish to stay, I will give you a dowry and arrange a new marriage for you. She closed her eyes. I know Alistair was not good to you. You do not have to remain a widow for his sake. I looked at the Princess Dowager. The arrogance had drained from her completely. The pain of burying her own child seemed to have stolen all her vitality. Her once straight back was now stooped. In our last life, she had been neutral towards me. In this life, she had protected me. I was grateful to her. But I didn't want to stay in this place that had been my prison for 2 lifetimes. I kowtowed respectfully. Your Highness, I wish to leave. A flicker of sadness crossed the Princess Dowager's eyes. She closed them wearily and waved her hand. Very well. In the soft light of early spring, I left the ducal manor. My father had been stripped of his official post, and the family home had been reclaimed by the crown. They were now squeezed into a small house in the northern part of the city. I heard there wasn't enough money for my father's medicine. He probably wouldn't last the year. My stepmother was bedridden from her stroke, driven half mad by her daughter's gruesome end. My own mother had to manage everything, and the stress had aged her terribly in just a few short days. My maid asked timidly, Miss, are we going home? I shook my head. The Princess Dowager had been generous, giving me a large sum of money. I bought a small house in the south of the city. Free from all my troubles, I spent my days painting and writing. Sometimes I would volunteer at the soup kitchens, doing things I enjoyed. Many of my neighbors tried to set me up, saying it was a waste for someone so young to live as a widow. They asked what kind of man I liked. I always just smiled and politely declined. A faint image of a man flickered in my mind, then vanished. I heard that Leo was doing very well at the Royal Academy. He had the emperor's favor, and several high-ranking ministers were hoping to make him their son-in-law. We were like two ships passing on a river, drifting further apart after a brief encounter. One spring day, I was in the backyard planting flowers, holding a new Persian cat. Beatrice had always loved peonies, so she had dug up all my roses. Now I could finally plant my own roses again. The cat saw a vibrant yellow rose and playfully swatted at it. My maid smiled beside me. Miss, it's such a lovely day. The sky cleared up so quickly. Yes, it did, I said, smiling as I looked up. The clouds were scattering, and sunlight bathed the earth, leaving no trace of shadow. Suddenly there was a knock at the gate. I got up to open it. Standing outside was a person I had never dared to imagine seeing again. He was dressed in the robes of a royal scholar, his figure handsome, his eyes smiling. I've earned my place at court now, he said. Is it still too late to propose? A lump formed in my throat. My eyes stung. I just stood there, speechless. Yes, spring was here. From now on, every day would be a good day.